I'm so happy to have you here, Debra. Thank you so much for being here. You are the founder of Your Career Design Lab, and you and I actually met at a beautiful experience retreat alongside other amazing, very thoughtful humans. And I remember us sitting at the fireside and actually having a fireside chat, right? And we really connected, first of all, our energy, right? But then we also connected so passionately, I remember, around what kids really need and what adults really need to get to support their kids, but so much more support themselves first. And so I knew that this was a really great connection. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Victoria. It's always wonderful speaking to you.
I am so excited to talk. I would love if you could share with the parents and the people that are listening to this interview. You know, let's just start. You know, the best way to eat a big elephant is to take one bite at a time. So let's just start with one little bite. Tell me a little bit about your story and how you got to actually be the founder of Your Career Design Lab. Why don't we start there?
That's a great question. Well, I'm going to be completely transparent. For over 30 years, I owned my own public relations and marketing company. So my whole background, and I think a lot of moms or people who are working can relate to this, is that I had clients, right, that I wanted to get to the highest point. So being a fixer, being a woman of action, that is what I did. Oh, you've got a problem. You want to be on the Today Show. You want to be on Good Morning America. I'm going to get you there. Just buckle up. Let me take the driver's seat. I'm going to get you to where you need to go. And I was very successful at that. And somehow I had the notion that I could use the same idea or the same way of operating in my own family. And I came to find out that was not going to happen. So it's been a long journey to finding how I can operate my operating system within the family operating system, because it's very different, obviously. And I know that may just sound like, well, of course, but I think a lot of us think we're successful outside of the family and we get those accolades. Oh my God, you're incredible. Oh my God, I can't believe what you did for me. And it's kind of a little bit of ego. And you think you could bring that into the family, but it can guarantee you it does not work that way. So when you ask about Your Career Design Lab, I had a couple of friends, because I am the fixer, would come to me and go, Debra, Abby has an internship at a job, but she hates it. She's just watching Netflix. And I'd go, well, why doesn't she speak to her boss? And she'd go, oh no, she can't do that. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I go, well, email. And it was just one of those kinds of things where I had 4 friends, of course, coming to me because I'm the person you come to, and I'm going to fix that. But then I realized early on when I started Your Career Design Lab, there are many trajectories of these kids. And it was really over time following their lead. They really taught me, you know what? It's not one linear line. You just don't go into college, find the college of your dreams. It's going to be the best 4 years of your life. And you're going to come out with the most incredible job. And I'd be talking to kids. They're like, yeah, I took a gap year. Then I went to college. Then I took another gap year. I took time off. I did this. And I'm like, oh, and they're still successful. And they're the ones that really taught me how to be, and then bring that into my family.
I love that. So I want to backtrack a little bit because that was a lot in one breath. Yeah. And I think what people need to know is that your Career Design Lab and what you do is really about supporting people, young people predominantly, and their families in creating the future, right? And the path towards their future that really fulfills them, that really provides them with the joy and the success that these children want, right? Like for themselves. And if I was to backtrack, in order to receive joy and success in life, we first need to be really clear about what joy and success means to us. And that comes from so many different places. The moment we're born and we come out of that womb, it's like, your name is this, and this is how old you are, and this is the year that it is, and this is who you're going to be, and this is the family that you're in, and this is what our values are. And before you know it, you're busting at the seams with all this identity. And then there's this time in our life where we have to make decisions. And depending on how, the environment has been set up and the messages we receive, we're either really great at making good decisions or we are not so great at making them. And so that's where you come in. And I want to ask, if you could be vulnerable to the degree that you feel comfortable, what was your experience? I know that you have a lovely daughter. And what was your experience? Because you were a high-powered PR woman. And I speak to a lot of parents in my practice that I work with who, and I'll be one of them because I'm at that age where I'll be an older mom. And we're set up that we're successful because we're go-getters and we know what we want and we're pretty decisive and we can pivot if we need to. Kids, though, don't have those sets of skills. They need to be led. What's been your journey? Because it's an amazing one and I would love for you to share it.
It really is. And it's actually, oh my gosh. Well, first and foremost, as I said, so I was the mom that you were just talking about. I also realize now upon reflection that I base so much of my, my parenting thing on what others were doing. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this can relate to this, where, you get into these mom groups and depending on the high powered environment that it is, or the competitive environment it was brutal for me because I didn't have a sense of who I was as a mom. It was more of a sense of who I was as a businesswoman. So, I'd be in environments, whether it was in New Jersey or New York, where it's like, well, what are your kids doing? Well, my kid's going to be going to Brown, because they have been tutoring kids in Elizabeth, New Jersey since they were 5. And she is on the debate team. And it'd be like this monologue. And then internally, I would panic, to be perfectly honest with you. And then unfortunately, I relay that panic onto my child and to my family. And I realized how absolutely horrible and wrong that was. But that kind of narrative that was coming at me, I didn't have the wherewithal to say, well, that's their journey, but I'm going to look at my kid for who and what they are. And it's interesting, Victoria, you say that. Because before, when I'd be working with kids in my thing, I'd go, okay, let's look at what you've done. And here's how we're going to, what I ask now is, my question is, who are you? And I am so passionate now about really trying to excavate who kids are from their core. Because growing up, exactly what you had said before, we never stop to ask our kids, who are you? Maybe at 5, they want to be an astronaut. But if we kept asking those questions along the way, instead of putting our ideals and labels onto them, I think we'd have very different parenting environment, very different family dynamics. And so that is something I've learned greatly. And it was really, so I've learned that. And I think that that is so important to ask them who they are and just listen. And also something, and maybe a lot of people who can relate to this, which really broke me open, was that from our backgrounds, from our inner childs, we grow up with, maybe it's called the 4 horsemen. And that is, control, conflict, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And I will admit, it's like an AA program right here. I am Debra Cooper, who parented in the 4 horsemen. But you know something, Victoria, really owning that and now looking at that, I could never identify why I had such internal anxiety, anger, fear as my child was growing up. And now I realize that I parented in that way. And I can guarantee you that is the way to estrangement, to arguments, and not connectiveness.
And so much wisdom that comes from the experience, right? And you're impressing this upon others now. And a lot of the parents that are listening are in that space
Yeah.
though. They're not in that space where they can really viscerally feel what you're talking about. Like, oh, totally, yes, me too. They're not there yet. They're kind of like in the weeds of it. And as you're talking, what I'm hearing is that there's some things that you found out about yourself, right? You were parenting in the Four Angry Horsemen, right? The Gottmans talk about that, and I love them. And what had that become, what it was? How did that get created as a way of being and relating within you?
Oh,
Because
well,
the point is that didn't come from because you had a kid and all of a sudden you started parenting that way. That came from part of how you related. And I'm wondering,
yeah.
can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think that there's this idea that everything's great, everything's fine. I'm so ready for this. And then, oh, I'm a mom. And, this is what, it's because I'm a mom, or it's because I'm a parent, it's because of this kid. But really, those things were there all along.
That's right. Oh, Victoria, I love what you just said. It's so true. Somehow I felt when I had my daughter that I was just going to pave this yellow brick road. I
Mhm.
can't explain it. Like I didn't, and I think a lot of moms can relate to this. I always say this, but I think this parenting that we're in right now will go down as probably like the worst parenting from Spock because our messaging as a mom, we've lost our intuition, we've lost our sense of self and intuition, and there's so much messaging going on outside. you know are you doing this? Even from, I remember when my daughter was born, if I didn't I'm being honest, the $5,000 music, when I look at that now, I'm like, are you kidding me? The $5,000 music class that everybody was going to on the Upper East Side, my kid was never going to understand music. Like, we are all in that world, which creates anxiety and fear. And then before we know it, we don't want to be, but we're operating from that operating system. And then it's very hard to wheel back, or people would go, well, you have to know your kid. Well, how does one know their kid, at least the way I was doing it, unless Susie and Lisa and Jody were telling me how they were doing their kids? That's how I was basing my parenting on my daughter, and the milieu. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's our environment as parents, this milieu, whether we're in soccer. I mean, people who are like in that rec soccer or travel soccer, the whole world is set up for competitiveness rather than from softness and from, I just want to know what my kid is about and who they are. And in fact, my daughter and I just had a conversation yesterday, and it was interesting. She made a mention about somebody, and we're a girl that texted her, but she hadn't spoken to last summer. The old Debra, and I'm going to refer to as old Debra and new Debra. The old Debra would have went, well, what did she say? Now I know everybody's going to relate to this. What'd she say? What'd she do? Did you text her back? Are you going to meet? Well, do you want to go to New Jersey to go meet her? And instead, I took a breath and I said, how does that make you feel?
Mm.
And I have chills just saying it, because the new Debra, and Victoria, the new Debra can say that.
And not just say it, I have a sense from knowing you and having many conversations with you that you don't just say it, but there's an energy behind it that is open, and your daughter feels that. How many times have you said something a parenting program has told you to say and it did not work? Why didn't it work? Because the lights weren't on. The lights is that energy, right? And now it's different.
Right. I would say, how long has that been going on? 21 years. As long, as long as she's been born. And you were absolutely right that I felt she felt the energy. And Victoria, in that moment, she said, can I give you a hug? And if I tell you, my daughter for 21 years has not been a hugger. And I was like stunned. But all I'm telling is your listeners, if we just take a step back and really come from a place of what do they need? And we've said this before, but it is so true. Everybody, all of us just want to be seen and heard. And broken down if we allow our child to just be seen and heard without being that fixer, we'd have a very different relationship. And you know, the reason I say this is because at 18, and I'm going to be honest, because I know a lot of moms are going through this, to be honest with you, that at 18, she basically came up to me and said, we're done here. And I was like, haha, we're done here. Like, what? Again, so unconscious. And she goes, you're toxic. This is a toxic relationship. I can't be a part of it. And she estranged herself for the last 3 years. I mean, she'd come in and out, but all she was asking for is what she is getting now. And that for other moms listening to this, we really have to be conscious of not being above our child or below our child. It's really about being at their level and letting them take the driver's seat without fixing, but asking the questions.
I love what you're saying, and all of it makes so much sense. And the thing that I'm so curious about is, lots of times we say, just look for the unmet need for the child, let's look at the kid. And you know me, I'm so curious about, what about the parent? My question is,
Love that.
how did you get to a place of taking it from the I know this to the sustainably doing it and becoming, and I think we should give that new Debra a name, like Phenomenal Debra, or I like
Wise woman, Debra.
the wise woman Debra.
Wise woman.
WWD. Yeah. How did you get to that place of I know this and now I'm being this?
Great, great question. It just came to, I hate to say like a Jesus moment, but it really was. My family was falling apart. I had the estranged daughter, and I just really had to look at myself. And a program that I found, to be honest with you, really takes the first 2 weeks, because I was like, well, I've got to write this email and I've got to do this. And, it was back to that. And I remember the woman saying to me, what if you just be? And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like,
Yeah.
literally, Victor, I was like, what is she even saying? And I walked around pretty much in a coma going, what does that mean to just be? And so the first 2 weeks, to your exact point, is about finding who is that wise woman and how is she going to build her house, the one that makes her happy in it. And so I did some exercises around it. And I know that sounds, for the listeners, well, like I've done that, or I speak to my therapist or whatever, but there's some deep work of understanding my actions, not just mentally, but emotionally connected. I emotionally connected to my actions. And then bringing it around to back to me of what do I want to look like? To your point about kids, instead of, well, I'm a mom and I'm a great mother and I'm this, I'm that. No, I want to be Debra. What did Debra want to look like now in her life? And from that space, I had to look at and own and take responsibility. I think that is really the answer to this, is I, for once in my freaking life, had to take responsibility. And that is something, Victoria, that my daughter is seeing now. And it makes her feel so good that by me taking responsibility, she's feeling listened and heard. So I hope that's, I think, the question that you were asking. Here I always thought that was like, oh, well, tell me, oh, let me do this, let me do that. It's now just, I'm here. I'm in my wise woman. I love who I am. I feel it. What do you have to say?
Mm-hmm. I love that, because it starts within you and in you taking responsibility, which really just means like I am responding in all the ways I am able to whatever is in front of me, right? And it's really leading yourself,
Yes.
right? And you then leading yourself are modeling that for your child, right? It's not about a blame. It's not about looking at the consequence or the circumstances and the context in which are creating your situation. It's really saying, okay, here's the context and the situation. And so what is my responsibility and control that I can take over here with me? Not in a sense of blame, because I'm not hearing blaming yourself.
Not
This is,
at all.
it's empowering yourself.
100%. That shift, Victoria, I love what you just said, because I did. And I think a lot of people listening to this could do that. Like I would say something to her and I'd go, oh, why did I say that? And I'd like berate myself. And then I hated myself. And then I would take it out on my husband or whatever. Now it's just like, I can't explain it. It's just the sense of, yeah, I've got my foibles. I'm not perfect. I'm not in, and you know what the thing is? I'm not in control. And that, I have to tell you, feels so good from someone who's a control addict. you know, you know, and thinking that that's where my accolades are going to come from. And I was just so wrong. So it does feel good in the family dynamic. She feels it. We all feel it, that we can accept everybody for who and what they are and not for what we need them or want them to be, because we're not fulfilling that in ourselves.
Yeah. And that's really love. Love is acceptance, acceptance of someone for what they are and also what they're not. And just, right. It's not, and a lot of parents, I think, hear that right now and say, oh, but I'm enabling bad behavior. And in two very separate things, right? Enabling behavior is a completely different conversation. What you're talking to is permission to be.
Mm.
And you could only come to that because you allowed yourself to really breathe and be whatever you authentically are. And that's what I want to actually ask you about now is authenticity.
Yeah.
And knowing you, you're very empowered and very opinionated,
Yes.
and also very dominant personality. And it's what really makes you effective in what you do. And it can create a dynamic, can't it, inside of relationships? And I wonder, and I don't have the answer to this, only you do, in relationships, in the world of being successful, that's very authentic. You know, it's like, right. But in relationships, when you're relating to others and others are relating to you, hopefully, and there's a reciprocity and an acceptance, hopefully, a love, right? Those kinds of behaviors and ways of being don't always feel as authentic as they do when you're trying to reach a goal or, you know. So how did you learn what's really real for you? How did you get to be and give yourself permission to just be Debra? What did you have to go through? Was it like an exorcism? Like what?
Yeah.
I see you got a haircut.
Oh, it all starts with the haircut, as we all know. It's all about the good haircut. No, you know what? I love, 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 love that question, because so many times and people can relate to this, I'd be in my head and I literally never really listened because I was so indoctrinated into people coming to me and wanting to hear my opinions, how I was going to get them to where they were. So in my family dynamic, like you said, as my husband or my daughter was talking, I'd go, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And then they would just look at me like, were you even in this freaking room? And I tell you something, I think a lot of people can relate to this. I'm like out of my body. It was just crazy. What I learned to do, and this is part of the thing that I was doing, is that I learned how to rapport. As you know, it's called rapport, where you sit. And it's just been so beautiful to have this with my husband and my child, to just say, you know, it's called a soft rapport, where you just go, do you mind, can we like just talk? Can we just chat for a minute? You know, which instead of, can I talk, you know, like as a little child, something, can I talk to you for a minute, already things come up and cortisol comes up like, oh my God, I'm in trouble. What is this going to be? It's a very even playing field. And then it's just sort of saying, I feel, coming back to I and being vulnerable. I'm feeling this. I'm feeling this. Not like, when you did that and I think this. And I just realized like that language and the way that we talk within a family dynamic, like you're saying in a relationship, is so demeaning, is so full of shame and blame, that how can love grow from that? And just an aside, Victoria, what you said, I remember being in New York and a friend of mine who's a single mom because her husband died. And she's like, it's all about love. And again, I have to tell you something. I listen to her, I go, I don't know what the hell she's talking about. Like, what the hell? How can you just love? That made zero sense to me.
Yeah.
Love to me was getting you to from point A to point B, and how wrong that is. And so what you're saying is, so now I'll have a discussion. Can we just have a chat? And I will express from my point of view. Then I will be completely quiet. I don't interrupt. I don't put the ego on it. He'll say or she'll say what she needs to say. And sometimes, you know what? It's in that moment. It's not about like having the conflict completed. It's just hearing out. And if somebody gets flooded, one thing I used to be, and I forgot what this is called, when my husband go, I don't want to talk about this anymore. And my kid would go, I don't want to talk about this. Oh no, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Okay. I'm sure there are so many parents right now going, holy, that's me. That's me. And I'd go after them. Now I've learned that when your cortisol level, when you're going there, you're flooding. And you just need to say, it seems that you're getting a little upset. Maybe we can revisit this, because the mind cannot take that when you are flooding. So just these incredible tools. And then it's just so wonderful because you can hear the person for who and what they are. They're listening to what you are. And it's just a beautiful thing. And love can come from that.
Yeah, I love that so much. You just spoke to so many different aspects of, in permission slip parenting, my real method, the R stands for, do you want to be right or do you want to seek understanding? And
Oh,
are we committed, right, to really looking for what the other person is feeling, thinking, being in that moment, what they need, and understanding them? Or are we committed or attached to being right? And what you just said in terms, and this was so important, I think touches on so many things that parents bring up, which is we talk about capacity, and sometimes the cortisol level rises and we don't even know we're being flooded, and we want to continue because we just want to get it done. In our society, it's like, don't go to sleep angry, and we have made that mean everything must be ironed out tonight and must be done, and pretty little bow on that Tiffany's box and on the shelf. And that's not what it means. And what you're saying is we can actually love and feel complete for this evening
yeah.
and still have things to talk about and still have things to work on. And we can have both. We don't have to choose like one or the other. We can have both. And there's ways to do that. There's ways and tips and things, right? But that realization is something that really is golden, because once you get that realization, it's like, oh, there's no time limit on this. Like, we can be and evolve together and love one another through the process. We don't have to agree on everything. So that's beautiful. And I'm so happy to hear that so many wonderful things have come from your own growth. This is really, really wonderful, Debra.
Oh, I'm so glad. Victoria, I know too, when we talk about when you were just saying that, I also realize how much we get into our stories. And that is something else that I'm trying to excavate for myself, is the stories around things, right? Because we all, like what you were saying, we have to give meaning to everything. So we're going to tell a story about it. Or our mom friends or friends will go, I just want to tell you a story. I just want to tell you a story. And the story has nothing to do with like facts and evidence. There's no evidence base in it, but we love talking in stories, and it's such a waste of time. And it's interesting. I was talking to my daughter yesterday, and she was about to go into a story, and she's learned too. I don't need to. I can make a decision based on just the moment of making that decision. And I don't have to say, well, I'm making this decision because so and 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 so. It's just such a waste of time to be in our stories. So if I can help moms out there, it's another thing, is just like you just said, you don't need to put meaning through stories to things. Let them just be, and let yourself just be.
Mm, yeah. We qualify things all the time
Right.
because we almost need to create a reason for why we want to do what we want to do. It's kind of like, it's like it is because it is because it is. When someone said to me, I remember the other day, why do you want to do that? Because I want to do that.
That's right.
Why do you want to eat that? Because mom, that's what I want to eat. I just work with so many families and so many questions all the time about, but why? And it's sometimes we don't need to have any reason, but just because that's what I've decided to do. And that's what feels good for me right now because I'm so connected and embodied. And my body's informing my decision, right? It doesn't have to come from all these places. And I think with what you do with young people
Yeah.
and families, that's important because deciding on what the next step will be in your journey in life, you really, you want to be connected to what your purpose is. And you connect to that through being in your body, right? Our emotion body. So I love that so, so much. This is such a rich conversation and so important, and important for parents who are going through this now with their teens or young adults,
Yeah.
but also for parents who are just starting out.
Absolutely.
Debra,
Absolutely.
I have one question for you that's very, very important. And before I ask it, because I want to ask it towards the end, is there anything that you want to share with parents that you haven't shared in this conversation yet?
No,
That you've got?
you brought up, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you brought up the thing about, kids going through school now, and especially, ones that are going into college now, or just and the whole, even starting in middle school. God, if I could go back to what I know now, how I'm helping kids, to your point, I'm getting so many kids in high school, going into college kids, etc., even up to 60-year-olds. And the main message is not feeling good enough, imposter syndrome, and low self-esteem. And if we could embody, or like you're saying, impart these things that we're talking about today, we'd have such a different way of going about life. You know what I mean? And it's to your point, is that I'm trying to help parents and kids alike to go, what are you, first of all, who are you? I have a thing called the Dada list where I ask that question. What did you do in your room when you were a child, when time just flowed and you were just happy in your world till your mom called you for dinner? I can guarantee you, Victoria, 9 out of 10 times, it is in that moment that that's where your essence is. That's where your soul is. However, when you get out of that room, it's, what are you having for dinner? Why aren't you eating what I made? And then like the barrage like goes on for the rest of your life. But I bring you back to that time. And then they start to discover things about themselves that got buried deep in those in their body. And I bring that back out and letting them find their passion, letting them find their journey, letting me just be the GPS to them exploring what they want to do. And I'll tell you something, I think the world's changed a little bit because of COVID. That whole linear, go to 4 years, come out, get your internships, have turned completely around. So I let the kids explore what it is that they want to do, what's going to make them happy. Because with so much mental illness, as you know, it is about bringing these kids back to their essence, their passion, and their happiness. And not letting that little voice going, well, they have too much control. They're having too much power. All of those, I'm not going to say it online, but F-bombing messages that keep
I
us
give
in
you
our,
permission to say the F word. It's
oh,
okay.
thank you so much. The fucking messages of that, well, you give your kids so much power. Oh, we do this, we do that. No, like F that. It's like what you said. What do you want to do?
Mhm.
from who are you?
Mm. Deborah, very, very important question for you to wrap this up. If you could go back
Mm,
to that time, right while you were planning on having your daughter,
oh, yeah.
what would you tell yourself? If you could have 20 minutes with yourself, just 20 minutes, what would you tell her? What is the one thing that you would want her to know?
I'd say you better get your shit together as you're going to really fuck this up. Like, I'm just being real with you.
Yeah.
I really I remember because, I ran my PR firm and stuff, and it was just one of those moments that my friends were having kids. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I was married for 12 years before I had a kid, and a kid was never really on my mind until it was kind of like, well, I'm just being really honest. I want one of those. I want one of those.
I want that, Louie.
Exactly.
Not that one, that one. Right.
Exactly. I want one of those. And it was like then when she was born. Obviously, I was very excited, but then I see now how I treated it. I took her at 4 weeks old up to a church in like up New York. It was a baby yoga thing because I had read that yoga calms the baby down. Yoga does all these magical things, and I wanted a magical child, and I'm going to do everything I can. And I remember it was like freezing cold. It was a snowstorm. So I'm unwrapping her and we're going around. My baby's 2 years old. My baby's 8 months old. I go, my baby's 4 weeks. And I swear to God, Victoria, I thought the woman was going to call social services. Like, what? It is a snowstorm. What is your baby do? Like, I needed to go to this class because it was like bringing a client. Like, and so I would say to myself, do the work, get your shit together, and don't live outside of yourself as you're having this child.
Hmm.
Truth.
You are there today, Deborah.
Yes, I am, Victoria. And you know what? That's what makes it so, that's why I want to share this message because I'm so passionate about the pain that I went through. But now on this other side, it is the most, I'm sorry it took 21 years, but it's beautiful now.
Thank you so much for sharing yourself. It's the biggest contribution